From our Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I am Ahmed Ramadan. Our top story for today, the US is facing a severe egg shortage due to a major bird flu outbreak and supply chain disruptions. Millions of egg-laying hens have been culled, reducing supply and pushing prices to record levels. The H5N1 bird flu strain has devastated poultry farms since 2022, affecting more than 150 million birds. Egg prices jumped more than 15% in January, the biggest rise in nearly a decade, with some retailers now charging up to $10 per dozen. Consumers are struggling, with some grocery stores imposing purchase limits. Farmers face delays in replacing culled flocks, prolonging the crisis. Regulations requiring cage-free eggs have added to supply constraints. Nevada has temporarily lifted these rules to ease shortages. High prices have also led to a rise in egg smuggling from Mexico, with border confiscations up 29%. Theft is another issue. Thieves stole 100,000 eggs from a Pennsylvania farm in February. The U.S. is increasing egg imports, including 15,000 tons from Turkey, which ranks among the world's top 5 egg exporters. However, the Department of Agriculture warns prices may rise another 20% in 2025 as the crisis continues. President Donald Trump has ordered the closure of the first national database tracking misconduct by federal law enforcement officers. Experts say this database has enhanced public safety by preventing bad officers from moving to new agencies and starting over with clean records. In 2020, Trump himself proposed creating database on instances of excessive use of force related to law enforcement matters. He had suggested this after the murder of George Floyd, a black man, by a white police officer, which sparked protests in the US and around the world. However, the database was not established until 2 years later. Former President Joe Biden then ordered the creation of the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database. In January, Trump issued an order revoking Biden's orders, including the one about establishing the database. A new report reveals the top 50 think tanks in the U.S. have received hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign governments and defense contractors. The Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft's document notes that between 2019 and 2023, foreign governments and state-owned entities contributed more than $110 million to these influential institutions. The biggest donors were the UAE, the UK, and Qatar, contributing $16.7 million, $15.5 million, and $9.1 million, respectively. Among the think tanks receiving the most funding from foreign sources, the Atlantic Council topped the list with $20.8 million. This was followed by the Brookings Institution with $17.1 million and the German Marshall Fund with $16.1 million. In addition to foreign funding, the U.S. government also directed at least $1.49 billion to these institutions, with the Rand Corporation receiving nearly $1.4 billion of that amount. The report assessed transparency among these think tanks, revealing that only 9 were fully transparent about their funding, while 23 were partially open. 18 think tanks were labeled as dark money institutions, as they did not disclose their donors at all. Another major source of funding came from Pentagon contractors, which have given more than $34.7 million to these think tanks during the same period. Some institutions, such as the American Enterprise Institute, have publicly acknowledged funding from defense firms such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. It has raised ethical questions, as many of these think tanks provide expert testimony to Congress on foreign affairs and defense policies. A previous investigation said that less than 30% of think tank-affiliated witnesses testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee fully disclosed their donors. The Trump administration has removed migrants held at Guantanamo Bay. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, confirmed that 177 Venezuelan migrants were flown to Honduras for deportation back to Venezuela. the administration has been pushing aggressive deportation policies, signing deals with Colombia, Venezuela, and El Salvador to take back deported migrants. Last month, President Donald Trump ordered 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay for what he called criminal illegal aliens. Guantanamo Bay base in Cuba has been infamous for housing terror suspects since 2002. Trump has now begun using it to detain what he claims are high-risk migrants. Flights carrying migrants to Guantanamo Bay began soon after Trump's directive. Within a week, the Pentagon confirmed that 10 high-threat individuals were flown there. The Biden administration had sought to scale down operations at Guantanamo, but Trump's latest moves mark a shift in policy. Prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump is urging the U.S. government to declassify FBI and CIA files on Malcolm X. The demand comes on the 60th anniversary of the Muslim civil rights leader's assassination today. Crump made the public plea at the site where Malcolm X was killed in New York City. He was joined by Malcolm X's family. Crump's call follows President Donald Trump's decision to declassify FBI files on John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. Malcolm X, later known as Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, was assassinated on February 21, 1965, while addressing a crowd at Harlem's Audubon Ballroom. Some believe the FBI and police played a role in his murder. A letter from a deceased officer claimed authorities were involved. In 2022, New York paid $26 million to two men exonerated in the assassination. Scholars say the files may reveal hidden truths about the surveillance of Malcolm X prior to his assassination. The CIA and FBI put the Muslim leader under surveillance after witnessing him drawing large crowds where he spoke of black nationalism and urged black Americans to defend themselves against violence. More than 200 Muslim community members gathered in Annapolis, Maryland for the 2025 Maryland Muslim Lobby Day, advocating for key legislative issues. The event was organized by the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, the United Maryland Muslim Council, and the Islamic Maryland Action Network, among other partners. Held at the House of Delegates, participants lobbied lawmakers on 10 priority bills. These included an anti-doxing bill, immigration reforms, criminal justice changes, and efforts to repeal the state's anti-BDS executive order. The Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, or the BDS movement works to end international support for Israel's oppression of Palestinians through economic pressure. CAIR Maryland Director Zainab Chaudhry highlighted the significance of civic engagement, stating that the event helps shape a future where all voices are heard. Other leaders, including Zia Ashraf and Nadim Ahmed, praised the community's participation and productive discussions with legislators. U.S. warns Hamas over alleged body swap. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. A top U.S. official has warned Hamas after Israel claimed the group returned the wrong remains instead of prisoner Shiri Bibas. Adam Bowler, the U.S. envoy for prisoners, condemned the move, calling it horrific and a clear violation of the Gaza truce. Speaking to CNN, he warned, "If I were them, I'd release everybody or they are going to face total annihilation." His remarks follow claims from the Israeli army that forensic analysis found the remains received were not those of Bibas, an Israeli prisoner held in Gaza. Hamas said it handed over the bodies of Bibas and her two children, Ariel and Kfir, as well as Oded Lifshitz, on Thursday under the ceasefire and prisoner exchange agreement. The group stated that the captives had been killed by Israeli airstrikes during the 15-month war on the enclave. While the U.S. response has been swift, Critics point to a double standard, noting that Israel continues to hold thousands of Palestinians, including children, under indefinite detention without a trial, a practice condemned by human rights groups. The Fourth Geneva Convention prohibits transferring detainees out of occupied territory, yet many Palestinians remain in Israeli prisons in violation of international law. Despite the ceasefire, Israeli airstrikes and raids have continued, with reports from Israeli media confirming Netanyahu is actively working to sabotage the truce. As violations mount, international pressure on Israel grows, though the U.S. officials remain focused on pressuring Hamas. Israel will release 602 Palestinian prisoners on Saturday. This includes 50 Palestinians who have been sentenced to life imprisonment and 60 others with lengthy prison terms. The release is a key component of the first phase of the swap deal, which followed the Palestinian faction's submission of the names of 6 Israeli prisoners set for release. According to the Palestinian Prisoners Media Office, 47 Palestinians from the 2011 Shalit deal who had been rearrested also will be freed. Additionally, 445 Palestinians from Gaza detained after October 7, 2023 are set to be released. Earlier on Friday, Hamas's military wing, Al-Qassam Brigades, announced the names of 6 Israeli prisoners who will be released Saturday as part of the 7th batch of the prisoner swap. To date, Israel has received 19 prisoners and 4 bodies. On Saturday, Israel also will receive 6 more prisoners, while 4 more bodies are expected to be handed over next week, marking the conclusion of the first phase of the agreement. In return, Israel has released 1,135 Palestinian prisoners, including dozens of serving life sentences. However, the start of negotiations for the second phase of the agreement, which was originally scheduled for February 3rd, has been delayed by Israel. The truce deal took effect last month, halting Israel's genocide in Gaza, which has killed at least 61,000 people, mostly women and children, and left the enclave in ruins. Last November, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Israel also faces a genocide case at the International Court of Justice for its Gaza war. Humanitarian aid trucks carrying building materials for the reconstruction of Gaza entered the enclave through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt on Friday. The flow of various sorts of humanitarian aid into Gaza continues, although it has been significantly restricted by Israel. The number of aid trucks entering Gaza over the past 2 days has not exceeded 30% of the expected volume, the Gaza Media Office said Sunday. It cites Israeli restrictions on the entry of humanitarian supplies. Gaza received fewer than 180 trucks, far below daily quota of 600 set under a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, according to the office's statement. The Israeli army launched airstrikes early Friday on sites along the Syria-Lebanon border, claiming that Hezbollah was using them to transfer weapons into Lebanon. The latest escalation comes after a fragile ceasefire took place in Lebanon on November 27, ending full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah. Despite the ceasefire, Israel has committed nearly 1,000 violations, killing and injuring dozens in Lebanon, including women and children. Late Thursday, the Israeli daily Israeli Hayom reported the Israeli army also carried out airstrikes on the Syrian city of Homs. Following the overthrow of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime on December 8, Israel has conducted dozens of airstrikes targeting Syrian military positions. A Uyghur activist who was detained in Morocco for more than 3 years has been freed and resettled in the U.S. 36-year-old Idris Hassan was arrested in July 2021 at Casablanca Airport. This was after the Chinese government accused him of terrorism. After Interpol issued a red notice for his capture, he was imprisoned in Morocco. Previously, Hassan had worked as a translator in Turkey, documenting crimes against Uyghurs in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan in northwest China. human rights groups played a key role in his release, along with Canadian, American, and British diplomats in Morocco. Hassan's arrest had sparked international concern. Human rights groups warned that extraditing him to China could lead to his torture or death. Hassan's wife and 3 children remain in Turkey as refugees as advocates continue to push for the family's reunion. In Altadena, California, a devastating wildfire destroyed Masjid al-Taqwa, leaving its congregation without a place to pray. The mosque was a pillar of the Muslim community for 42 years. The house of worship was reduced to ashes in January's deadly Eaton fire, which killed 17 people and scorched more than 14,000 acres, including thousands of homes. Despite their grief, worshippers refused to let the fire break their spirit. With Ramadan approaching, about 20 mosque members and families, many now living in motels or with relatives, gathered at the local Islamic school. It was their first communal prayer and meal since the tragedy. Their volunteer imam, Junaid Asi, brought much-needed hope. Standing on plush blue prayer rugs, he announced the school would provide space for Ramadan prayers 4 nights a week. Gasps of relief filled the room, followed by murmurs of Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. For many, Masjid al-Taqwa was more than a place of worship, it was home. Founder Aaron Abdul Shakur lost his house business and properties. Salah ad-Din Benatia, a new Algerian immigrant, had just discovered the mosque. Medical student Mohammed Al-Dajani, who lost his condo, cherished the mosque's multicultural community, where Arabs, African Americans, South Asians, and North Africans prayed together. Even amid their loss, members vowed to rebuild. Sakina Ali, whose children's school also burned down, says they will remain united. The key is to keep showing up, she says. We will rebuild. Their mosque may be gone, but their faith and resilience remain unshaken. That's all from our Toronto studios. Thank you for watching Muslim News. We are a community channel dedicated to bringing you stories you can trust. Please like, share, and subscribe to our content. You can also comment to let us know what you think of our coverage. You can donate now by visiting muslimnetwork.tv/donate. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV. Salam.